Welcome to Unibet's Inside the Octagon. I'm John Gooden, and with me once again is Dan the Outlaw Hardy. UFC 194 is fast approaching, and today we take a look at what is arguably the biggest co-main event in UFC history. Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold for the UFC middleweight title.
December 12th, it's East versus West. It's Weidman versus Rockhold at UFC 194 for the middleweight strap.
So UFC 194's co-main event, Dan, it's worthy of a main event spot on any other card. Let's get into it. Let's take a look at the facts and the stats for this one. And from memory, these guys physically are very, very similar, as we see across the board, but there's some very interesting stuff to take from this. We are going to be treated to one hell of a fight. Yeah,
well, I mean, 100% takedown defence is really interesting because obviously a big part of Luke Rockhold's game is his submission skills, which we've seen here, you know, highest rate in the UFC middleweight. So is he going to be able to employ that game plan? Is he going to have to rely on his striking, and how will Weidman deal with that?
3 seconds is the most time that Weidman's been spent on his back as well.
3 seconds.
Which is pretty impressive.
It is.
So this is a bit of a battle of two very, very physically big middleweights, although I've heard somewhere actually that Weidman's coming in really light for this fight. That could be quite interesting. But they do really good work from the outset trying to get the centre of the octagon, and that is where they're enabled to use their best tools.
Yeah, it's the key to their game plan, to every game plan that they start with. I mean, we'll just take a look at it now. The first thing I want to point out, though, is that they do this for different reasons. Like, Luke Rockhold likes to pressure you so he can counter, so he can catch you as you're moving in, and so hopefully he can hit you with a good, clean strike and then finish the fight on the floor.
He fights quite long, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
So
he wants to maintain that distance and maintain that range. You can see him. Watch the fake that he used with his back foot here, which is interesting because obviously he finishes this fight with a kick. So he's quite cerebral about what he wants to do in the fight. He's moving his opponent back. He's trying to gauge which way they're going to step and how they react. Look how he's sweeping them round towards his left leg. It's a tactic in everything that he does. Same with Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman's slightly more aggressive with it, and his game plan when it comes to closing the distance is that he wants to punch his way into a clinch and drag you to the floor, whereas obviously Luke Rockhold wants to push you back against the fence, but that's so he can maintain the range. Now, the reason I picked this clip is because this is the first 20 seconds with Anderson Silva, and at the time, Anderson Silva was the best fighter in the world. You know, that was undisputed. And you can see here Chris Weidman coming in, you know, with less than 10 fights on his record and really pushing the pace on Anderson Silva, not giving him the respect that most people would, even Anderson Silva's sparring partners, which may have been a little bit disconcerting, having this guy aggressively pushing you back immediately and not being concerned about that aura that you have over everybody else.
And it's unlikely that he's going to be in awe of Luke Rockhold at this point. One of the things that I'm in awe of Luke Rockhold is, in fact, his striking. He does really good work, specifically for me, with his kicks. They are devastating.
He's very good at setting them up. Like we said before, he fights long. He uses this counter right hook really well that he used against Philippou. And he's very good at following the momentum of the fight. When someone starts to struggle, when someone's hurt, he's good at measuring them and picking them apart, not rushing in too much. But look at this beautiful work here against Philippou. How he circles him onto the fence, circles him towards that left leg. What I want to show you this part here is, look how he stepped around to the side. And as we've talked about this before in the breakdown show, this has given Philippou this window of opportunity to move out and escape. So as he does that, obviously Luke Rockhold's got the left kick to the body to wait for him. You know, so it's not like he's just stepping and it's a coincidence here. He's actually setting these opportunities up for himself.
He's opening the door to. It's a leading manoeuvre.
Exactly. And the same with Michael Bisping. Watch him, you'll see a slight duck, and then he's going to throw the head kick. So Bisping, for a second, thought there was a takedown to defend. He follows it, and then this is where we go into his submissions game. He catches somebody with a clean shot. Now, in this point here, Michael Bisping's rocked. The best time to jump on a submission is when you've hurt a guy. They're a little disorientated. Now, you're not going to finish Michael Bisping with a one-arm guillotine.
It's almost offensive.
Yeah, it's not going to happen in a regular fight. Michael Bisping would have had to have been hurt, would have had to have been rocked. And that head kick just there, as you can see, sent him stumbling, and then Luke Rockhold continued to hit him before he jumped on that guillotine. So that's another thing that I like about Luke Rockhold, is he doesn't get carried away with the fight, he doesn't get overly aggressive. Like I said, he's very measured. If he sees an opportunity, he'll jump on a submission. That's really his bread and butter, that's his game.
OK. Well, his opponent, Chris Weidman, as I think you alluded to before, he takes the centre of the octagon very quickly. and imposes his will. And he uses that wrestling mentality that he has just to keep coming forward.
Yeah, and it's his confidence as well. I mean, he's not a striker, he's a wrestler. He's got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but you'll see him being quite creative. Now, look at the position he's got here. This is something I talk about a lot, and we talk about these lines inside this octagon. It's almost like he's playing a game. It's almost like he's trying to control this space inside here. It's like that's his zone, and you're not going to get inside this. And if he can push you right outside up against the fence, he will do. But his priority is to maintain that. And you'll see this against Machida, pushes him right back against the fence. And the more that Machida backs up, the more pressure Weidman puts on him. You'll see he'll start to get closer, he'll start to land punches at a really close range with his arm quite bent. But Machida's effectively trying to run away, trying to find space that's not there. And this is relevant because Rockhold needs that space. He wants that space for the long kicks that he uses, for his counter right hook that he uses. And crowding Machida was a good kind of trial run to fight a striker that is unpredictable and can leap in and catch you with unpredictable shots. And here against Anderson Silva, as you can see, it was just the clinch work, it was just the dirty boxing. And then when he's on the floor, we talked about this with Frankie Edgar last week on the other breakdown. His body weight is up over his shoulders. It's no coincidence that these guys both train with Renzo Gracie. You can see the drive forward, the confidence in their grappling skills. His hands are on the centre of the chest, and when you can see here, as soon as Anderson Silva starts to try and feed that arm to the outside, we'll just skip back a second. As soon as Anderson Silva tries to get his hand on the mat so he can start working an offensive game, you'll see Chris Weidman feed that arm inside. You can see him doing it just there. So if we play it again full speed, watch this arm. It's going to come straight inside and out of danger. So his arms are always safe, but his body's over the top of his opponent's shoulders. Pressure on the throat. It's very difficult to climb your legs up. And Luke Rockhold's not necessarily a guy that submit people off his back. He wants to be on top, he wants to be in top position, take the back, take the mount. We don't really see him on his back too often. So if Chris Weidman can put him in that situation and stay square, keep centre and keep driving forward, it's going to make it very difficult for Rockhold to get any submissions off.
OK, well, as we always do, we go to social media and get some questions. UFC 194 has thrown up lots and lots of questions, but let's see what we've got for the co-main event. I'm going to choose this one from Jake. Who do you think has the advantage on the ground between Weidman and Rockhold? I mean, that's a really interesting question because they're both high level, and as you've alluded to, NCAA Division I wrestler Weidman with a black belt as well, but Luke Rockhold is a submission wizard. Well,
that's the thing. It depends how you classify advantage, because Weidman's advantage on the ground is to stifle the person, to beat them up, and to transition to better positions. You'll hear Matt Serra in his corner always talking, hit a couple of times, then go back to the pass, constantly working to progress your position. Whereas Luke Rockhold is much more of an opportunistic striker, which we'll see in the next playlist I want to show you, because he'll catch you in a flurry. Now watch this. This is Tim Kennedy from his last fight in Strikeforce, trying to take him down, and Luke Rockhold manages to scramble around and take his back and gets himself into a good, strong, advantageous position. And this, one of the best submissions we've seen in the UFC. Look at this scramble. Tucks his leg underneath and locks up a reverse triangle. And then from this point, he just kind of slowly wears Tim Boast down, but he never releases this. He works himself to a good position where he can lock a Kimura grip in, and that's really the only thing that you're going to finish Tim Boast with. He's going to battle out everything else, and it needed Rockhold's whole weight and whole strength on that one arm to get the tap out of Boast. But it was that opportunistic, we'll catch him in a flurry, and that's what Weidman's got to be aware of, because if he's working for takedowns and if he's caught sleeping, Rockhold will be on his back before he even knows what's going on. And then once he gets the top position, he's very good at holding it. Look how he's gripping the body of Machida there, squeezing and locking down onto him and then just wearing them down until they effectively give him the submission because they just don't want to be there anymore, you know? It was a really nice performance against Machida, and he was aware that Machida was one of the most dangerous threats in the division. And the way he just walked through him on the night was astonishing. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's got to give him confidence going there against Chris Weidman. Yeah, absolutely. So Chris Weidman, let's talk about his grappling. Yep. From that wrestling straight through to a really, really strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu base as well. I mean, it's paper thin between these guys. It is. It's all about strategy in this fight because they are so evenly matched physically and technically. It's important that they both get in there with the right game plan that's tailored towards their opponent. I'm big on game plans. I think it's important to have a clear idea of what you want to do. This is something that I want to point out. This is Mark Munoz that he's taken down in passing guard here. Now, Mark Munoz was one of the best wrestlers that we've had in the middleweight division. And Chris Weidman was just dumping in with single legs, left, right, and centre. It was a very comfortable fight for him. And even in the scrambles when Munoz was trying to get back on top, just look at that wrestling tenacity. And again, here with Anderson Silva, great sprawl by Anderson Silva, but he gets right underneath and lifts him up. And that was really just strength. I mean, if we look at the posture that Chris Weidman's in when he gets that takedown, a lot of the strength is literally just from his lower back. There's not... You know, it just shows the kind of athlete that he is. I mean, that whole lift just here, he's got Anderson Silva over his shoulders now, and he literally just lifts with his lower back and turns him. You know, it's really effortless, and that's something else that Rockhold's got to be aware of, because in those scrambles, that strength's going to come into play. Okay. And just this forward pressure again, Anderson Silva trying to maintain that distance, and Chris Weidman very good at throwing the legs out of the way and coming over the top. And this really is the most important thing that I want to show you. Obviously, Weidman's last fight, fighting Vitor Belfort, who's also a southpaw, the same as Luke Rockhold. Now watch this takedown. This is really, really nice. As he steps in, the thing I want to point out to you is the way that Chris Weidman puts his foot inside. Now, most of the time when people are going for a takedown, they'll set the foot on the outside so they can step across. Okay. But in this situation, because he's fighting a southpaw, what he actually wants to do is remove that front leg. So as we play this on, I'm going to go nice and slow with it so you can see. He's going to pick this leg up, and then he's going to start to circle away. And you watch Vitor Belfort's foot slide across the canvas. Yeah. His base is just being stripped away from him. There's nothing he can do.
In the same place, isn't he?
And it gets him straight into a passing position. Now, Vitor Belfort's no slouch on the ground. He's been in the game for a long time. And just this progression from half guard, the ground and pound, moved into mount, finished the fight there. It was a really nice game plan. One thing after another. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. Yeah. He was listening to his corner man, hit a couple of times, pass, hit a couple of times, secure position, hit a couple of times, take mount. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He's got a good working relationship with his cornermen and with his coaches, and that's going to be really important on the ground against Rockhold.
It's very nice the way that he's able to go from one aspect to the other. You don't see as many UFC athletes, you know, especially in the lower echelons early on in their career, to be able to chain it so well. Yeah. But he uses it for the next step each time. Exactly. And he's still quite young. He's still quite young in his career as well.
Yeah. And he's, you know, he's an open book as well. I mean, if you talk to the guy, he's really interested in learning. I mean, he sat at the side of the octagon when I was training for the GSP fight and just sat and watched. Guys like Frankie Edgar are around him all the time that do link things together very well. Yeah. He's got these guys that he can feed off and learn from all the time. And like you said, you know, he's early in his career, he's still very young, and he's got a lot of time to develop.
Very excited about this fight.
Yeah.
So, with such a huge fight, make sure you get involved. Are you on board with Team Weidman? Will he continue his dominance over the division and rack up a 4th straight defence of his middleweight crown? Or can the former Strikeforce middleweight champion Luke Rockhold add the UFC title to his trophy cabinet? As ever, there are odds to be found on every outcome, every round, and a host of other markets. Watch and bet live with Unibet, the official betting partner of the UFC. Well, thank you for watching. Remember, you can get in touch with us via Twitter, so send your questions to @Unibet using the hashtag #InsideTheOctagon. Of course, this isn't the end for our analysis of UFC 194. In our next show, we take on the main event, Conor McGregor against Jose Aldo, to prove once and for all who is the true featherweight king.